Y'all, it's that time again to talk about one of my favorite bands from high school. We're ranking the albums of Lamb of God. Alright, and we are going to kick things off in 1999 with Burn the Priest. Now, I include this even though they had a different name. This is still the same lineup minus Willie Adler. I will not be including Legion though because that's a covers album. But yeah, short notes on this thing. Bloodletting is absolutely disgusting. There's a lot of fun cuts on this album. Dimera kills, and it's really fun to imitate the vocals on that one. Suffering Bastard, Lame is fucking brutal, and who doesn't love a song named Goatfish? I'd say this has a lot more in common with like a Napalm Death album than Pantera at this point in their career. The songwriting isn't super memorable, admittedly, but it's still just a really damn fun album. It's not like in the upper echelons of their discography, but I put it at a C, and remember, C is still good. It's just maybe not as good as some of these other ones we're going to get into. Next up, we have New American Gospel in 2000, so this is their first album under their actual name, and the first with Willie Adler on guitar. It's definitely a bit rough sounding, even acknowledged by the band due to apparently like time restraints and also heavy drinking at the time. Even so, I think it gives it the same level of charm as listening to like old school death metal or second wave black metal. You get used to it. Stop being a little bitch.
Oh, my freaking ears!
And speaking of which, once more, this goes heavy on the grind and death metal influences. Randy just going nuts with the shrieks and squeals. I really miss that implementation in his kind of range of styles that he uses. Black Label is an absolute classic and still great to hear live. A Warning and Pariah are total rippers. In the Absence of the Sacred is just insane with those chuggy parts. Love the opening of the Black Dahlia and those absolutely unhinged vocals from Steve Austin of Today is the Day on Terror and Hubris in the House of Frank Pollard. The Subtle Arts of Murder and Persuasion also has great atmosphere with that creepy lead hook, and I really love the bonus track Nippon. For a long time I've held on to keeping this in A tier as it was a long-time favorite going back to when I first got into them in the early 2000s, and after nearly 20 years listening, it's still an A. Fuck it. Like, just fucking raw. Great album. And just a reminder, again, I always limit myself in terms of how many albums can go per tier, because it just makes it a lot more interesting to talk about than just putting everything in like 2 or 3. Next up is As the Palaces Burn in 2003. So I'm just going to say it again. In my opinion, this is Lamb of God's best album, hands down. I know many say that Ashes of the Wake is the one, and it's definitely close, but for my money, this is the one I will always remember catching the premiere of 11th Hour on Headbangers Ball, and just how awestruck we were. I was hooked from that moment on.
The hour of reckoning draws near. Judgment Day is here and gone.
Now, of course, we have to talk about how this album had a pretty infamous, nightmarish production, for which I highly recommend the accompanying documentary. Like, poor Devin Townsend got handed a complete clusterfuck to sort out, and he is not shy about sharing his thoughts on the experience.
If I try and mix this, it's gonna kill me.
But frankly, I love the sound of this album. Like, once more, I think it adds to the charm for me, and it gives it this completely unique darkness and edge that I have not found on really any other metal album. It literally sounds like it's just choking you throughout the entire runtime, and as for the songs, they're all classics in my book. Ruin, As the Palaces Burn, For Your Malice, Boot Scraper, Vigil. So many fond memories of driving around when I was kind of just having my driver's license for the first time and blasting this through that old cassette player adapter with the Discman. Loved it back then, and it's still my favorite to this day. Going to S tier. Goated. And then we follow that up with Ashes of the Wake, as I just mentioned, in 2004. Now, as I said, this is a very close second for me, and admittedly, the production is objectively better, probably even the best it's ever been. This is deeply inspired by the Iraq War, which just reminds me of how old I'm getting. Once again, I remember the first time I heard Laid to Rest, and what a perfect single. Like, every guitar player I knew was learning that song and trying to master that great little pinch harmonic in there.
The blood's on the wall, so you might as well just admit it.
And once more, the entire album somehow lives up to that level of quality, somehow with the likes of Hourglass, Now You've Got Something to Die For, Break You, Omerta. More great anthemic moments to this day I have so much fun screaming along to. It hit Billboard at 27 and is still their top-selling album, certified gold. Also has to be at S tier. So then they followed that up with Sacrament in 2006, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about this one. As much shit as the Palaces Burns gets for its production, I have more issues with how this one sounds for some reason. It even feels like inconsistent from song to song. Redneck was also the first single I didn't actually care for, and it's grown on me with time. But yeah, it's also the beginning of Randy starting to use those Yarly sort of Phil Anselmo sounding vocals, which have always been my least favorite as far as this band's sound. It is a really fun guitar riff, though.
This is a motherfucking invitation. The only one you could ever need.
Walk With Me in Hell has a pretty rad hook, and that breakdown in the second half is hype as fuck. Again We Will Rise, Blacken the Cursed Sun, and Pathetic are solid headbangers. Descending has a cool hook too. Yeah, I don't know, it was just kind of a turning point for me back in the day when I went from this hardcore fan to more of a passive listener. And honestly, even re-listening today, I feel like I enjoy it less and less in comparison to the others. And I think it's largely due to this being Randy's worst vocal performance, in my opinion. So I'm actually dropping this one down quite a bit from the last time I did this, and I'm putting it in D, which I know is kind of sacrilege to a lot of people. But remember, this is relative within their own discography. It's not an overall grade. If I was giving it a review, I wouldn't give it a D. I'm just considering comparatively how I feel about these albums to make it as interesting as possible to watch within the larger scope of music. I don't think they've truly put out a bad album, honestly. So if you want to cry about that, you need to build a stronger ego, and I don't apologize.
Let the hate flow through you.
Comment your rage down below, it only helps the video. Also notably, it was the top-selling heavy metal album of 2006, number 8 on Billboard, and received the Album of the Year award from Revolver magazine, so what the fuck do I know? Opinions, right? Next up, we have Wrath in 2009. So full disclosure, I hated this album when it came out. Just, it felt generic and phoned in. I felt it was like meathead gym music, but again, I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong. And when I go back to this one now, this one actually gets better each time. The kind of mellow-deathy intro is a unique way to open things up before In Your Words brings the pain. I'm still not a big fan, again, of the Yarly vocals on here, but they balance them out for the most part a lot better than on the previous album. The snare tone on tracks like Set to Fail gives me early Slipknot vibes.
Somewhere you find it lost your way.
Contractor is a fucking meat grinder of a track. Love that start-stop riff against the persistent beat on Fake Messiah. Broken Hands has that sick vocal intro. Dead Seeds is hooks for days. It's not perfect, and it has some kind of fillery moments here and there. Not a big fan of Everything to Nothing or Choke Sermon. I'm not gonna go crazy like some people and say this is their best album, which is still shocking for me to hear, honestly, but it's definitely a good one, a lot better than I initially gave it credit for. And it was also their most successful in terms of sales, apparently, hitting number 2 on Billboard. I'm going to put it at B, and I can almost really call it like a B+. Next up is Resolution in 2012. So great scream, first of all, to kick things off with those doomy riffs on Straight for the Sun, leaning into scorching desert landscape atmosphere. Then the incredible drum transition into the raging desolation, highlighting all of their best qualities. Plenty of other bangers here, like the Undertow, the number 6, Invictus, Terminally Unique, Visitation, and I really wish they'd do more symphonic stuff like King Me, because that track fucks. I even like the dark bluesy interlude Barbarossa. Maybe a little long at almost an hour and with a little room for trimming on stuff like The Walking Dead and Insurrection, but overall I feel like this one is seriously underrated, and while I take the time to go back and re-listen again for every time I do these rankings, I feel like a lot of the time commenters are basing their thoughts and feelings on memories from like 5 or more years ago. So seriously, give it another solid listen if it's been a while, and then make up your mind. And if you still feel the same way, fine. But me personally, this one's another like B+, kind of A-. Like I almost want to put it up there, but there's something else I want to leave for that spot. Which brings us to Sturm und Drang in 2015. Still Echoes is another bang banger of an intro, and Randy really bringing back his rage and range in his harsh vocals with more screeches, all that stuff that I said I was missing from that earlier era makes an appearance here. And even more so on Anthropoid, which honestly could have fit on one of their first 3 albums. That's definitely one of my favorite all-time tracks. Great riffs, more scream-alongs, more great hooks across the board on tracks like Erase This. 512 is good because it gets extremely personal. Embers with Chino, Torches with Greg Puciato of the Dillinger Escape Plan. Honestly, the only track I don't like here is Overlord, and that's not just because it has clean vocals, it's more so that Randy just isn't really a strong, clean singer, and the song itself is sort of boring. But yeah, overall, this thing is a total ripper. It's the fastest and heaviest since Ashes, in my opinion. Drummer Chris Adler going out with a bang, too, because I don't think they'll ever be quite the same without him. Yeah, I'm putting this one at A tier. I think it's just short of S, honestly. Then we add the self-titled Lamb of God in 2020, and I always say I'm always hesitant when I see a band late in their career drop their self-titled album. Like, it just it gives me bad vibes, and usually they don't turn out well. And I'd say overall, the sound of this one is most similar to Sacrament. Checkmate almost sounds like Redneck Part 2, and it's a pretty decent song, even though I wish I could unhear the line, "Make America Hate Again."
Cringe.
Likewise to Reality Bath with "This is the New Abnormal."
How embarrassing.
Lots of lyrics, honestly, that feel like they think they're more clever than they actually are. Gears is pretty good. New Colossal Hate, despite some iffy vocals, is also a good one. Resurrection Man has one of Randy's best blechs of all time. Really good for that, but unfortunately it's in service of kind of a dull middle of the song. Luckily, they rally in the final portion and it gets pretty sick there. I do feel like the guest features feel more tacked on here, like they don't feel as implemented into the music, but the D-beat on Routes is undeniably headbang worthy. So yeah, I don't hate it. I still stand by what I said in my initial review overall, that I don't think it's that great, but it's a perfectly enjoyable album and an acceptable entry point for a new listener. Far from the best they have to offer. I'm putting this one at kind of like a C+. I do like it a little bit more than when I first heard it. And that brings us to Omens in 2022. So after the self-titled, my expectations going into this one were pretty low, but I will say that they genuinely surprised me with lead single Nevermore, which has all the best qualities of the band on display. Sick riffs, pounding drums, a great scream-along chorus, banger way to open the record, too. Unfortunately, they followed that up with the title track, which is fine, but pretty mid and somewhat forgettable. Grayscale was a bit better, but still not quite on the same level as the bar set by that first one. This caused me once more to lower my expectations, but luckily getting into the other tracks, there's still plenty to enjoy here. Vanishing really impressed me with some seriously Melodeath-inspired guitar work that reminds me both of Ashes of the Wake and also some of the best As I Lay Dying tracks of that same era. Similar notes for the verses of To the Grave, even if the chorus could use a little work. But then there's the absolutely ripping Ditch. Like, seriously, fire whoever decided to make Omens a single instead of this one, with its explosive intro and balls to the wall, thrash metal speed giving off Pantera vibes.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
And really, there's no shortage of better headbanging content with the likes of Ill Designs and crossover-infused Denial Mechanism, which is another easy favorite of mine. Alternatively, Gomorrah goes for a slower, more atmospheric vibe, more on par with tracks like Remorse is for the Dead, conjuring plenty of darkness as Randy repeats everything is doomed to fail, as well as the moody yet still heavy closer September song, which even throws in some strings for good measure. It's no King Me, but it's still nice to hear them toying with orchestration again. Overall, I'd say this album is a vast improvement from the last one, from the songwriting and energy in its performances to the production. Despite some slightly lower points, it's pretty tight and cohesive. So it's not up there with my favorites yet, but even that could change with time because it managed to grip me right from the beginning, and stylistically it is scratching that old high school itch a bit, so I'm gonna put it at B tier. Y'all check out this playlist for more groove and thrash metal tier lists, and let me know your rankings in the comments. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.